was taking apples this morning, and I kept eating apples. And I kept being hungry all day. Finally, I've got to eat something else. Was it because the glycemic level is lower in the apples?
When trying to stay on apples as a mono fruit for the day, that hunger kept visiting. I'm wondering why this is. Apples, in terms of their sugar content, are one of the lowest of all the fruits available. And so therefore your body's carbohydrate need wasn't being fully satisfied, and so it was continually driving you. If you tried bananas instead of apples, you would probably have found you'd got a lot more success in keeping that hunger at bay. It's the lower sugar content. It does depend to some degree on the variety of apples. Some of them are much sweeter than others, and I don't know which sort it was you were consuming. After your seventh one, you moved on to something else. Apples are a very useful food and mustn't be belittled in any way. They have a lot to contribute, but in terms of sugar content, they definitely have that much lower content.
It's interesting, too, though, because I know Rosie and I both talked about it, that when people first experiment with mono meal, mono day, mono diet of any kind, what they find is that they can fill up on the food, but they can't get satisfied on the food. That there are many other areas of emotional connections to food that they're used to stimulating frequently. And when you go without that stimulation, you go, I'm looking for something else. This isn't doing it. A. B, that when we go to whole foods, that the volume increase is dramatic. 6 or 7 apples might seem like a lot of apples. May I ask, how much time went by before you had eaten 6 or 7 apples? So between the time you woke up in the morning at 5 or 6 or 7 this morning and 5 o'clock tonight, you had eaten 7 apples, possibly 6. All right, so in the course of 12 hours, you had eaten 300 calories, tops, possibly only 200 calories. I would be hungry. But if I was going to eat apples like that, for instance, I would sit down and eat 6 or 7 or 8 apples for a meal, and then expect that 2 or 3 hours later, I'm going to be hungry because that was a really tiny meal that only had 200 calories. It's part of the issue that we talk about all the time. When someone has a salad, they're good salad eaters. They can eat a big salad, and they eat a big salad. That salad, in and of itself, has about 10 to 15 calories.
Depending on what it's dressed with.
Now the dressing, if it has a teaspoonful of olive oil, has another 150 calories or something close to that. So the caloric density issue is one that really has to be considered. You can say, oh yes, I had the salad, I'm full. Or it wasn't even a big salad. A little bit of fat supplies a fantastic amount more calories per bite. And when you get to something like an apple that's really only giving you a few calories per bite, you've gotten almost as low as you can get in calories per bite. Celery will give you about a calorie or a little less than that per bite. But an apple's only giving you a few calories per bite. It's not much. And a meal of apples, 12, 14 apples. You sit down, you eat them, you make a meal. It takes a lot. And this is where we talk about the idea that it is actually training to eat more volume of one thing, because we have, over years and years and years, trained ourselves to eat tinier volumes. We've been taught socially to move away from the table at the first sign of fullness, that that's normal, that's healthy. Whereas that's not the normal and healthy. That only works if you're eating standard American diet that's so calorically dense that the likelihood is that even then you have overeaten. On a wholesome raw food diet, for many people in the first year or two of it, it's actually a matter of eat as much as you can. The heck with how much you care for it. It's as much as you can to train the body to be able to eat what we would consider to be normal volumes.
I would like to add on to that, the feeling that one gets on completion of a meal. On a standard diet, the feeling is one of heaviness, of dullness, of not wanting to get up out of the chair. And when we've spent a lifetime of expecting to feel that way at the end of a meal, when we embrace a healthy diet and find that the feeling at the end of the meal is actually one of a lightness of being, the feeling that you could get up and dance should someone ask, is not registering somehow as I am satisfied, I am full. Once it's possible to take that little shift in perception and to seek at the end of a meal a feeling of lightness of being and alertness, and relinquish totally a desire to feel that heavy, dense, narcotic, grounded in the chair feeling. Once we let go of that and experience and expect to experience this lightness of being, we can eat a meal and feel satisfied. Doug mentioned earlier the client of mine who said he'd had this enormous meal of bananas which had filled him up and stopped his hunger, but he was in no way satisfied. What he meant to say was, in no way did he feel heavy and dull as he was used to feeling after a standard meal. So we need to have fresh and new expectations as to what we feel post-meal. That would help too.
How would you go about the training of eating so much volume? Because I find myself a lot of times grazing. I could be drinking it and feel like, that's good, but then 45 minutes later I'll eat something else. And to get enough to hold me over, I keep trying to do that, but I still find myself stopping when I feel like I've had enough, but it wasn't enough, and then I graze.
The question is about how to go about increasing our capacity to eat large volumes of water-rich foods. I would suggest to think of it that you're putting your stomach on a flexibility training program. And the same way that when you wanted to increase the flexibility of a muscle anywhere else on your body, you don't jump on the floor and do the splits. You would gradually work on increasing the flexibility of your hamstrings and the insides of your thighs. When it comes to food, what I find has worked well with clients I've assisted is to eat to begin with at slightly more frequent intervals, and to eat until you feel that to eat more would become uncomfortable. We're talking about not putting thought here towards the actual appetite as we're talking its physical comfort. And then as gradually they get more and more attuned to eating these larger quantities of water content food, the meals can become less frequent but larger, until finally you end up in a position where you're eating the appropriate number of 2, perhaps 3 meals a day, but the quantity that you're consuming at each meal is considerable. So perhaps little and often is a way in through the door on that one, gradually building up the amount that you're consuming at each sitting.